Okay. Good afternoon. It's what 10 to 1 UK time. Some very interesting things have happened. Obviously, the Derby County situation is very fluid, and not everyone agrees with my opinion that the EFL is to blame for the situation. Yes, Mel Morris, obviously as the owner, did what he did. He left the club in debt, still owns the stadium. The club's in administration because of him. We all agree on that. But I think if the EFL had properly done their job with the rules that they have in place and have had in place for a very, very long time, we wouldn't be in this position. And the way I do a likening to Bury is at the end of the season of the 2018-2019 season, there were already concerns about Bury being able to compete in the 2019-2020 season. Therefore, in my opinion, absolutely, I can draw comparisons with the Bury situation. Now, Birmingham City are in a similar situation with their off-field dramas and their stadium issues, and ironically, so are Everton. Everton are in a very similar situation. They're just a little stage further behind where Derby County are. So, the Premier League, the EFL, and the FA need to take some responsibility because they're the ones who set out the rules that clubs have to abide by. They're the ones who, set out the regulations that clubs have to abide by, and clubs regularly flout them. So, it is interesting. The situation. Obviously, there's been mixed views on what's happening at Derby County. Some fans are rejoicing at their demise. I will say this: next club could be yours. The next club in the same shitty situation could be yours. Too many clubs are badly run, and the governing body doesn't do enough to protect the institutions of the game. There's too much money within the sport. It's not evenly distributed, and now we're seeing the results of that further down the line. I think more clubs are going to end up like a Bury, like a Derby County, going at Macclesfield. Obviously, Scotland, bad defeat against the Republic of Ireland. England, a lot of criticism of how England have been playing in recent games. There's a lot of things floating about. Some cricket stuff. But yeah, most of the discussion in recent days has been surrounding, obviously, the Derby County situation. Has been surrounding the Nations League and the criticism that the players have for the competition, and the performances of some of the teams and nations in the Nations League competition as well. There's been a lot of criticism from fans about some of the flat performances. But when you've got big names within the sport saying, we don't think we should be playing these games this year, it tells you that UEFA might have got their priorities wrong with the Nations League format. The reason why it was introduced was there was a lot of criticism over the amount of pointless friendlies that were being played at the time, and fans were frustrated with the amount of international breaks for friendlies, the amount of friendlies being played. There was a growing frustration within football, so they try and ramp it up with making the friendlies competitive internationals, bringing in this Nations League, which determines your next qualifying group for your next tournament. And with obviously expanded Euros and expanded World Cups coming, there's going to have to be a change to the qualification format for said tournaments. And the criticism, I think, is fair. Although again, looking on social media, some of the comments are, "Well, you're well paid. Suck it up. Get on with it, Buttercup." Um, but at the same time, regardless of how much some of the top end talent is being paid, some of the top end talent, those lower down the pecking order in wages have also had an equally brutal season, which has been congested with COVID and the moving of the World Cup to a winter slot, which has affected not just one season, but multiple seasons have been affected by the World Cup in Qatar. We haven't even kicked a ball there yet. And player welfare. I don't think we want to see another Christian Eriksen on the pitch when a situation like that. So player welfare and is I think for me a key concern, because I will say this: looking at some of the European games and FA Cup games that I was watching this last season for the channel, players looked leggy. Players looked very, very tired. They didn't look fresh. They didn't look as committed to challenges, as as mentally switched on. There was clearly a fatigue factor there. Now, rules have been changed to allow 5 substitutions. I think that's a bit ridiculous. The game was fine with 3, but UEFA have allowed 5 substitutions. But there's definitely that 2 years ago when we had the suspension of play, it was very, very striking. Player gets suspended 2 years ago. Haircut, no, ponytail. We've just got the ponytail in again. I went to the shops and I can't be bothered with my hair flapping everywhere, and it's getting quite warm out, so I thought I'll put the ponytail in the hair. We haven't hit 1,000 subscribers yet. There is no haircut. We're not there yet. We're getting close to the 1,000 subscribers, but we're not there yet. Calm yourself. Don't get ahead of yourself. But looking at the suspension of sport and then the return to play, I've noticed that in the last 18 months, players are looking more fatigued than they were before the pandemic. I'm definitely noticing this. This is not just, and last year in the Euros, the game was more open because players were getting more fatigued, more mistakes are coming into the game, which is actually a good thing. My Grimsby Town, which one? I've done a couple on Grimsby Town. What, the history or the promotion? Yeah, I did the same one for Tranmere when they got promoted back to the Football League. That did quite well as well. But yeah, the Grimsby Town one, yeah, it did. Oh, yeah, the promotion one, yeah, I did a similar one for Tranmere when they got promoted back to the Football League a few years ago. That did quite well as well. What I find interesting is, because of the media obsession with a handful of clubs in this country, both north and south of the border, when you discuss other clubs that have solid fan bases that may or may not have had success or failure in their existence, I've got an annoying bit of hair there. When a lot of clubs get overlooked basically, that have solid fan bases both domestically and overseas. And I think it's quite right that we should have a look at their successes, their failures, their ups, their downs, and actually discuss the issues and the history or their role within the game. Yeah, it's the media obsession with a failing Manchester United team is ridiculous. Like they have every major website and newspaper has a dedicated Manchester United reporter. It's like there are 91 other clubs. Liverpool, Man City now, Spurs for some reason. They can't win anything, but that's the obsession. Arsenal to a certain extent. There's a handful of clubs based Chelsea. There's a handful of clubs that get 90% of the media attention in England, and of course Rangers and Celtic in Scotland. Oh yeah, Nottingham Forest. Back in the Premier League is much bigger news and much more important, I think, for the English game than Manchester United's having a meltdown over the last 9 years, and considering where Forest were at the start of the season, and where they ended up, I think the highlight of their season was firstly beating Arsenal, then following that up beating their local rivals Leicester City in the FA Cup. Some of the big boys in regards to how the direction and the trajectory of the club's history has gone. Oh well, I wouldn't say Nottingham's a nice city. It was called Shottingham for a while. Nottingham is a lot of the stuff in Nottingham is right in the city centre. So Trent Bridge, if you want to watch the football and then watch some cricket, you got Trent Bridge. You got two football clubs that are what 500 metres apart, if that, half a mile. You got Notts County, Nottingham Forest. You've got Trent Bridge, so if you like the cricket, that is a place to go. So watch Nottinghamshire play a county game or watch a test match. You've got the Nottingham Ice Rink, which is again right in the city centre. So yeah, Nottingham is quite an intense little city because everything's quite close together. Actually, quite a few people care about Notts County. It's just unfortunately, Notts County, their direction of their club is unfortunately continued on a downward trajectory, and they're in the non-league right now. But Notts County are vitally important to the history and the growth of the game in this country. And if you talk to fans from Nottingham, regardless of what league, county, or Forest are in, there is a definite rivalry there. And Notts County, as I say, are vitally important to the direction this game took in this country. Without clubs like Notts County, we don't have the Football League. I wouldn't say nobody cares about it. Unfortunately, that club has been, again, badly run, and that's another failing of the EFL and the FA in regards to protecting clubs from really bad ownership. Need I say more? But, you know, now Notts County, I mean, if I could do a history video on Notts County, I'd probably get just as many views as the video I did on Nottingham Forest, if maybe not more. Notts County falling out of the Football League was big news when it happened a couple of years ago. It sent shockwaves through the Football League. That no club is, invincible from, bad times. And this is where I think Everton, with the their fewest seasons played outside the top flight, Everton are in serious jeopardy of falling outside the top flight. Aston Villa are bigger. They've had more success. Although, yes, Nottingham Forest have won more European silverware. Aston Villa have won more FA Cups, more trophies, a lot more trophies. Nottingham Forest in total have won 12. Aston Villa have won double that. So, Aston Villa, although I will say this, again, Aston Villa, another club where their success has dried up in the last couple of decades. Yep, they won the one, Nottingham Forest won the two. So they won their only European Cup after the year after Nottingham Forest won their second against Hamburg. So yes, Aston Villa won their one as well. And they were, this was a period where a couple of clubs from the Midlands were challenging Liverpool for the dominance in the English game. It wasn't to last. We know that. And unfortunately, things happened later on in the 80s that had a negative impact on a lot of clubs in the English game. Look at my Oxford United video. I mean, they had a chance to play in Europe, but were banned from doing so because of the Hazel disaster and the subsequent European ban for English clubs. And it did actually ultimately cost Oxford United the opportunity to earn some more cash, and it led to them falling out of what was Division 1 at the time, which is now the Premier League, and they haven't been back to the top flight since 1988. So yes, there was a knock-on impact with the European ban for clubs. Yeah, Villa do have the opportunity to get back to the top of the English game. Absolutely, absolutely. It's been a very, very long time and some bad ownership. Randy Lerner, I think, is the archetypal American owner that you don't want. Although Liverpool, Man United have also had those bad owners as well. They are a huge club. They have potential to be, champions in this country again. They do. They were the most successful club in the first 3 decades of the Football League being in existence. They were the dominant side at the beginning. But unfortunately, and yeah, you can go back in time and say, back in the day, they were a solid side pushing for, in the European places, getting to FA Cup and League Cup finals. And yeah, they haven't had success since the mid-90s. And some bad ownership decisions have contributed to that. Some bad transfers have contributed to that. But I wouldn't say they're not a huge club. They are. They're the most successful club from the West Midlands by some distance. And again, if it wasn't for Aston Villa, and I do mean this, if it wasn't for Aston Villa and their chairman back in 1888, we don't have the Football League. Quite frankly. And when Aston Villa were facing hard times a few years ago, Birmingham City fans were the first to mock them. Trust me, I've got some comments on the Aston Villa facing administration. Look at Birmingham City now. They're the ones facing, corruption investigations, like criminal investigations. Half their stadiums closed. They should have been relegated from the Championship if it wasn't for points deductions for other teams. Yeah, they're bigger than Wolves. Although Wolves also very successful side in earlier times and historically. And imagine if Wolves and Aston Villa, because they have the ownership, it's about player development, squad development, and not being cowed by your Man City's going, well, we're going to tempt your best players away. Quite literally, and Liverpool. Yeah. There will come a point where, as I say, when UEFA bring in their new spending rules, that completely changes the atmosphere and the spending habits of these clubs, because Wolves need a new stadium. I wouldn't say it's other. There's been a lot of development at Molineux in recent years. A lot of money's been put into the stadium, upgrading it and increasing capacity. So I don't think they need a new stadium. I think the stadium is not a problem. I think they just need to get that success to justify the spend that they've put in recent seasons. Even if it's a League Cup or an FA Cup, they just need that bit of silverware, a bit of exposure in Europe, and suddenly the conversation changes. Molineux's not the problem. If you look at the redevelopment that they've done at Molineux, they've done it stand by stand. What was an old wobbly stadium a decade ago is not anymore. It's completely different. Depends how long ago you went there, but Molineux now is completely different to what it was 10, 20 years ago. They've done what Liverpool have done and Man United have done with their stadiums, is do it stand by stand development, build it up stand by stand. Same with Vicarage Road with Watford. It's been a long process at Molineux over many, many years, but the stadium looks fantastic now. It may not be the best stadium in the country, but it's not the worst, not by a long way. There are other clubs that don't even own their stadiums, who, like Derby, like Chelsea, that are in a situation themselves, which they shouldn't be in when it comes to issues with and proposals to, do stuff with the stadium, like Coventry. There's a lot of clubs that don't own their own stadium, that lease it. So there is that. Man United, thinking about it. Well, look, Man United again, the obsession. The Glazers have not put in the investment they need to Old Trafford, in the sense of the maintenance backlog is depressing. There's still space to expand that stadium. I don't know what would cost more. I don't know how the fans would feel about leaving the Stadium of Dreams. I think that could be a dreadful mistake, leaving Old Trafford. But then again, it's American ownership. They don't care about the culture and the history of. They just care about the money. Just look at the European Super League and look at some of the decisions that some of these American owners have made with European clubs. I've got to do an updated list of American owners of English football clubs and Scottish football clubs, because I think one of the Dundees is owned by a Scotsman, by an American as well. I have to do an updated list of American owners. So it is what it is. The Rico Arena looks massive from the outside. I used to go past it for university. It looks bigger than Molineux and Villa Park. It's not. It's a lot smaller. It's a hell of a lot smaller. I work with a Coventry City fan who's been to the Rico. It's not as big as it looks. It is quite imposing for what it replaced, Highfield Road, and it is quite a modern stadium. And on the outside, a lot of modern stadiums look a lot bigger than they actually are. But in reality, it's not the same. I've got to do a video on Coventry City, and we can discuss the issues they've had with the Rico, and we can discuss the issues they're going to continue to have. Nearest club to me is Reading. I'm only 3 miles away from their training ground in Arborfield, 3-4 miles. From my apartment to the ground is about 8 miles, 9 miles. They're building a brand new train station literally right by the stadium. So when that is completed, I could quite easily get to the Reading. Well, now it's the Select Carly Stadium, formerly the Medeski, within half hour, less. It's 20, about half hour. So it's not too bad. The next nearest football club. How long? I would have to do a change at Reading, but they're building a brand new train station, literally, which should be opening within the next 6 months to a year, which is right next to the stadium. How long? Currently, it takes about 15, 20 minutes from where I live currently to Reading. And then one change, couple of stops. I would say, 20 minutes to half hour. But wouldn't take too long. Wouldn't take too long. As I say, I'm what, a 15-minute, 20-minute walk, maybe a bit longer. Actually, no, maybe about an hour's walk, 15-minute drive, if that, from their training ground. Their training facility is actually quite a fantastic little facility. They used ex-MOD land and some old farmland as well, and put a brand spanking new training ground in the middle of the countryside, which is a fantastic facility, I have to admit. For its size, it's a fantastic facility. And it actually suits where its location as well. The next nearest football club that's professional is Maidenhead United. And then I would think Swindon and Oxford are outside of London. Inside London, probably Brentford would be the next closest professional club. There's some non-league clubs like in Windsor, Staines, but the next proper club would possibly most likely be Brentford or Fulham. Maybe Palace. It all depends on which direction into London you take, but there are some. Yeah, I live in between Reading and Camberley. I live in between the two, so I'm close to. I used to work in Camberley and I used to work in Reading. The irony of this. I'm not too far from Reading, so I'm actually almost slap bang in the middle between the two. I can get the train either way, and I can get to Aldershot's pretty close as well. If I wanted to go to Aldershot, watch a non-league game. And it doesn't actually take too long to get down to Portsmouth, or have I got a rail card? Since I've been riding my motorbike, although I have stopped now, I'm in the process of selling it. I haven't had to get the train pretty much for 6 years. I've got the train 10 times in 6 years, so work that one out. Work that one out. So I haven't had to get the train as much as I used to, but I know. It wouldn't take me too long to get to Portsmouth or Southampton to watch a game, Bournemouth to watch a game, if I wanted to. I could get to Brighton and watch a game if I want. There is a handful of stadiums that are actually surprisingly easy to get to by train, and quite a lot of grounds outside of London, and then of course inside London as well. There's quite a few that are what I would call easy access to to get to if you plan your journey in advance and you know where you're going and you leave a bit earlier than the main rush of fans. Because I've seen it when the fans are all charging to get for a 3 o'clock kickoff or a lunchtime kickoff on the train, and it's carnage. If you know you're going to have an away day and you've got your match day ticket and you're playing in advance, leave that little bit earlier, um, and just therefore it gives you that little bit of time in case there's any delays if you're travelling by train. And you're bound to bump into some football fans going the other way, which I've done before. It's been some good banter, especially when you're in different leagues. You go, hey, you're playing today, we're playing this team. Who are you playing? Oh, we're playing this team. I'm off to I've had it where I've been going to an ice hockey match and I bumped into rugby union, rugby league, and football fans all at the same station. And we're all wearing our different jerseys, and there's no animosity. It's like, oh, you're going to this? Yeah, we're going to see this team play here, and you get into that kind of conversation. It's kind of fun. But if you plan your match day experience, if you know what time your kickoff is or face off or whatever sport you're going to, and if you know the location, leave earlier than the main charge of fans going to the event. Because you'll get to your arena earlier. You'll get into the arena early without having to queue and battle your way through. You'll find your seat earlier, and then you can get orientated where various stadium or arena facilities are, and you can actually have a better day. And then again, when leaving, maybe take that little bit extra time. Maybe leave a little bit later. Let the main surge go, and then you can enjoy your afternoon, evening, and take your time getting home. Woodley and Henley near Reading. Yeah, Woodley's horrible. Henley's all right. I actually work. I cover my depot covers Woodley. Woodley's not very nice. Henley's all right. You've got the regatta at Henley, which is coming up soon, and there's a music festival at Henley as well. Rewind Festival, which is actually kind of fun because a lot of the 80s and 90s disco acts and rock acts wheel out and play their music. So that's more of a family-friendly music festival, a lesser-known one. Henley's quite posh, yes. Woodley isn't. Henley is. Well, there's bits of Woodley that aren't very nice at all. Trust me, I do the bins around there. There are bits of Woodley that you don't want to go. There's a few bits of Woodley you don't want to get lost down, but Henley's fun. Henley's a good night out actually. There's some nice pub restaurants. There's a nice market on weekends in the town square. Obviously, you've got the river. You've got the Thames Walk, where you can get the train at Henley and then you can walk down to Windsor. Get the first train to Henley in the morning, walk down to Windsor, and get a train back in the evening. It's if you've got the time, and of course there's rowing clubs. So if you do like your rowing, and especially Olympic rowing, like Sir Steve Redgrave and people like that, you've got multiple rowing clubs along the river, and you will see various Olympians actually training on the river. You will see paddle boarders, rowers, kayakers, all doing their training along the river in the height of summer. You will see a lot of them doing their training. There are horse riding. There's lots of horse riding clubs. There's a lot of equestrian stables in the Thames Valley area where I live. I used to do some of the waste collection, rubbish, not animal waste, the actual rubbish collection from several of the equestrian clubs and polo clubs in the area. And horse trainers as well for like racehorses. There's a lot of them dotted around the Thames Valley because of the flowing, undulating countryside. And there's a lot of them dotted around the Thames Valley, up the Lambourne Valley. So in Berkshire and bits of Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire, there's a lot of horse race trainers. There's a lot of equestrian trainers. And of course, with the River Thames and some of the rowing lakes like Eton Dorney, which is near where my friend lives, which was an Olympic venue, there's a lot of rowing clubs, such as Henley, that actually do their training for World Championships and Olympics and European Championships. So the British Olympic programme, the rowing side of it, do a lot of their training based out of Henley and other rowing clubs along the Thames and along other rivers as well. And you'll see them doing a lot of training for their various club events and then their international events as well. But yeah, Henley is quite a posh area. So is Marlow. But a lot of the people are actually quite friendly. I've got a lot of friends who live in the Henley, Marlow, Cookham area. Really friendly. Some real interesting stuff about that part of the Thames Valley. I've done the Thames Walk, which is a fantastic. Yeah, Cambridge as well. The boat race, Oxford Cambridge, Oxford's on the Thames, and the ISIS. Yeah, not the terrorist organisation, not the Egyptian goddess, but the actual sub-channel of the Thames. There's multiple rivers into Oxford, and Cambridge has got the River Cam and the River Ouse going into the North Sea via the Wash, which separates Lincolnshire, Cambridgeshire, and Norfolk, where Kings Lynn. Again, very good to channel, and therefore you can have rowing channels and rowing clubs. So yeah, the Oxford Cambridge boat race, and there's lots of rowing clubs associated with that. And again, Matthew Pinson and Steve Redgrave, if you remember the Atlanta Olympics and the Sydney Olympics, vitally important to British rowing, and obviously the sport. Hello, Dan. How are you doing? Stanley Cup Final. That's something I want to talk about. Can the Tampa Bay Lightning make it 3 Stanley Cups in a row? And can the Colorado Avalanche, who've never lost a Stanley Cup Final, stop them? So both are going for 3 in a row. Colorado want to win 3 Stanley Cup Finals from 3 Stanley Cup Finals appearances, and the Tampa Bay Lightning want to win 3 in a row from 5 Finals appearances. So that's going to be really, really interesting. Have I ever been on a rowing boat? Yes, I have, and I didn't enjoy. I did. I have. I've been kayaking. I've been canoeing. I've been rowing on a proper rowboat, not a sport rowboat. I've been sailing. The one I enjoyed the most was kayaking, because you're not stuck in that horrible, wetsuit thing. I found that the most enjoyable. I will admit. I found it more relaxing as well. But I was a lot younger. It was an outward bound school trip down into the depths of Devon, down in the depths of I think the Tamar, I think was the valley I was on. It was great fun. I'm not gonna lie, but I was right up in the what's the national park? Dartmoor Exmoor National Park, like the Highlands area of Devon and Cornwall. But it was great fun. Not gonna lie. That's those punting. That's what it's called. Punting. They're the canal barges, what you see in Venice and Cambridge. That's canal boats. Basically, they're basically mini passenger barges. So they'll be classed. That's called punting. Where you have a long pole and they push the pole off the base of the canal and then they steer with it. That's if you play Assassin's Creed, for example, or if you have seen, what's the Bond film? There's a Bond film set in Venice, which is Moonraker, and there's an Indiana Jones film, the Holy Grail. There's scenes shot around Venice, actually in Venice, and the canal boats are there. Yes, I think there's a university club that's involved with it, and there's a lot of canals in Cambridge, and that's actually historically designed not for being aesthetically pleasing, but to stop the city from flooding all the time because it's very low lying. Whereas in Oxford, they've channeled the rivers partly as flood defence, but also as military defence, because Cambridge is very low lying. Oxford's got hills around it, and is in a river valley, the Thames, ironically. So both cities are of similar age. They're both very, very important historically. I've got to do some video, on the other channel, but both have got rowing clubs, partly because they're on major rivers, and secondly, because of the channeling of said rivers, you can row. And and boating is actually very, very important for the history of both cities, crossing rivers and then the punting on the canals in Cambridge. Yes. But yes, the ones in Cambridge are the students. Yes, I've got a lot of friends and family live in both cities and both areas, and I've got a connection with both cities through friends and family, and 2 ex-girlfriends. One ex-girlfriend lives in Oxford, one ex-girlfriend lives in Cambridge. You couldn't make that up. Couldn't make that up. Just stop. And I get on with one of them. But yeah, the students in Cambridge and the students at Oxford, they have a big part to play on the sporting landscape of both cities and on the social landscape of both cities, with their involvement in amateur and professional sports and in the social life of said cities. But it is very, very interesting that you have this the professional rowing, the world champ, even like some of the real top nations from around the world, like the Australians and the Germans, our biggest rivals. A lot of those rowers, ironically, went to university at Oxford and Cambridge, or were involved in a British rowing club while students or training over here. So it is very, very interesting our impact on the sport of Olympic rowing, basically, and canoeing and kayaking and all the all sports. The American university system is so unique when it's intertwined to the major leagues. Yeah, it's weird how that's developed. I think the league that is the least impacted, other than the MLS, out of the I'm going to say the five major leagues, is the NHL because of the minor league system and the Canadian influence um, on the league, and the fact that there's a lot of professional players who develop their skills in Europe. Same with the MLS, they're not as reliant on the university system. But yeah, the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball to an extent, although Major League Baseball again has the minor league system where you don't have to be a university graduate to get into the major league system. But again, the NCAA programs, it does have a massive bearing, yes. But look how sports professionally and amateur developed in the US, the size of the country, each state having its different laws and different, rates of settlement. So, settlements getting, founded, at different times. Whereas in Europe, a lot of our major towns and cities have been in place for hundreds, if not thousands of years. In the US, we're talking what? The USA is younger than the entire length of time the Roman Empire existed. So the Roman Empire existed longer than what the US has been a country today. But the American university system, yes, it's how the sport developed, how professional sport and amateur sport developed in the US. Whereas over here, a lot of the sports developed through working or middle class, so business owners or working class people who work for those businesses, setting up sports clubs like the EFL, like the RFL, like the RFU. So our sports came from that club dynamic, whereas the sports over there, the university system is the driving force behind it, culturally, and it's just the diversion paths. Not every university over here has that sports program. Whereas, I'm going to sort my bloody hair out. Hang on a sec. That's better. Annoying strand of hair got loose at the ponytail. No, not every university here has a well-funded sports program. Although, yes, there are university leagues in rugby union, ice hockey, field hockey, the individual sports, athletics, swimming. There are university sports teams like Loughborough and Sheffield, for example, and Durham are big sports universities. Yes, rowing with the boat race, the historical boat race, yes, but at the same time, you can't rely on two university systems supplying all your top level athletes for that particular sport. It just doesn't work. There are loads of rowing clubs all around the UK. It's just Oxford and Cambridge, the university rowing clubs, are the most famous. But Henley, Marlow, there's Walgrave rowing. There's loads of rowing clubs near me. And I do what, and where a lot of my friends live along the Thames in between Reading and Windsor. Sometimes we'll literally walk along the Thames, sit down on a bench, and just watch them training for 2, 3, 4, 5, however many hours they're going up and down the river. But yes, you could argue Oxford and Cambridge. There is a lot of that development because of the boat race and the attention it gets from the mainstream British media and the international media, because it's the highlight of the rowing calendar, so to speak. But then you've got, the Henley and Marlow regattas. So Henley is the big one, then Marlow is one of the big ones, where rowing clubs from all over the country will go and compete. Thoughts on the LIV Golf League? Look, most of the players who've signed up for it are on the down end of their career anyway. It's rich guys complaining about other rich guys. It's not a good look on a PR standpoint at a time when most fans of sport, or just people in general, are struggling to get by, myself included. One of my neighbours is moving out of the building because his rent's being raised, because everyone's contract in the building's different, but a 7% rent increase was enough for him to go buy for what he's paying for. And I've seen his apartment. His apartments are half the size of mine, by the way, and mine's pretty small. He's living in a shoebox, but he was like, "Nah, kind of, I'm not justifying this." But his circumstances are a bit different to mine. But when you've got signing on fees of like 150 million just to sign up to this, I don't care what sport you participate in, team or individual, that's wrong. I'm not a fan of the PGA. I'm not a fan of how golf has organised itself with the TV rights and asking for too much money for broadcasting. Like, so the Open and Augusta, they should be on free to air like they were historically. They were the only two golf majors that I cared about as a kid growing up. It was almost religion just to casually watch them for 4 days with my dad or my granddad or my godfather. We would sit down and watch them for the 4 days. It was kind of actually good viewing. And I was allowed to stay up extra late to watch the Augusta Masters as well, as a special treat for being doing my homework or doing my chores. That was a big thing. We'd sit around the TV and watch it for 4 days. What the PGA with the Masters and what the European Tour with the Open have done is they've want too much money for a diminishing audience. And the BBC and the other broadcasters that were free to air were like, "We're not paying this." And it was the BBC that had the rights to golf. They just said, "No, we're not being charged this. We don't want to. That's too high a price to pay." And so it's gone behind a paywall. Anyone who says golf is growing massively is kidding themselves, because viewership figures are in the toilet from where they were at peak in the 90s. But what I will say is this: the best European Tour players now play in the PGA, or have done over the last 10, 15 years. The quality of the European Tour is crap. I will say this: every time a rival league gets set up, it generally collapses pretty quickly. We've seen it, as I say, I always hark back to this. The NRL, what is now the NRL, it was the New South Wales Rugby League, and then it became the Australian Rugby League versus Super League. Super League was doing this, offering these stupid contracts to players and teams to come over, couldn't actually sustain itself, has meant for the last 24 years, Rugby League is trying to basically rebuild its finances. Now, it's the last, I'm going to say 5-10 years. It's improving, but at the end of the day, it's taken the best part of 20 years for the NRL to financially stabilise itself. The European Super League, football, the ball wasn't even kicked and it collapsed. Again, some of the money that we're banding around, some of the fans are the ones who are going to have to pay for this, because who's going to justify they got to, if you're going to invest what sportsman is worth 150 million signing on fee? I mean, we can argue some of the contracts in the NBA and in the NFL are ridiculous. We can argue some of the contracts in European football and some of the transfers there are ridiculous. But that's just a single signing on bonus of 150 million just to entice a player whose best days are behind him to play a few tournaments a year. When they're banned from Augusta National can say if you can play or not the PGA. So it's now going to be down to the Open organisers, the Green Jacket of Augusta. They're the two ones, the Masters and the PGA Players Tour. But the two big ones are the Masters, Augusta, and the Open. They're the two trophies you want to win as a golfer out of the four majors. they're the ones who are going to say whether these players who are the PGA wants to ban are going to. They're the ones who are going to say, I haven't seen the Panthers Knights game yet, so thank you for basically dropping a hint that the Panthers have destroyed them. I missed the first 2 games of the day because I overslept. My alarm went off and I slept through it. I watched the Warriors get demolished again. Stacey Jones is going to have a big uphill task of turning this Warriors side around against Cronulla. And Cronulla didn't play well in that game either. There were moments in that game where Cronulla didn't look good. And Nico Hines, he had another up and down day off the kicking tee. And there's some nasty. Murdoch Masilla's elbow injury is nasty. That looks either like a break dislocation or a pure dislocation of his elbow. He was, the pitch side microphones picked up. He could barely walk off, and that's an arm injury. He was close to collapse. That's season done for Murdoch Masilla. That's a full on elbow reconstruction. Is the London golf course a world class one? There's multiple golf courses around London, so a golf club being built in Calcott Park in Reading. I think there's too many golf courses around. Trust me, there's too many. I used to work on one. But the London golf course, which one? There are multiple golf courses in Greater London and multiple golf courses in the southeast. Wentworth, I think, is the one you're thinking of, which is down the road from me. And then you've got Sunningdale, which is next door. And I guess what I used to do the bins on both those golf courses. So Sunningdale, Wentworth, the two golf courses that are world class near me. And then you've got Downshire, which is another golf course, which is round the corner. Then you've got Berkshire Golf Course, and then you've got Billingbear Golf. I've got about 7 golf courses within 10 miles with where I live. And that'll be Wentworth. They do the warm-up event and the women's event at Sunningdale, and then they go to play at Wentworth, which is just across the road in the next jurisdiction in Surrey. So Sunningdale's in Berkshire, Wentworth's in Surrey. They're about half a mile difference, quite literally. I've played on both. Wentworth is the one that's got 4 links. That's got 4 courses at Wentworth, and then you've got another one at Bagshot, which is up the road. There's about 3 golf courses in about a 3-mile radius of you've got Wentworth, Sunningdale, and Bagshot, and a couple of others. There's about 5 golf courses. From where I live, there's about 7 or 8 golf courses. The NRL. I'll have to obviously watch the West Tigers and match and the Panthers Knights game. But yes, some of the blowout scorelines. I think. Look, we've already seen 3 coaches lose their jobs this season. 2 in the space of like 4 hours. One of them resigned, however, and Nathan Brown. If you listen to what he said in interview, people going, well, he signed up for the Warriors. He should know they're going to back New Zealand. That was a personal decision. That things changed in his circumstances from when he was appointed coach to now. He said, "I'm never doing a head coach gig ever again. I just can't do it." People have failed to understand. If you're a head coach, constantly chopping and changing where you're coaching and where you're working, you've got to constantly relocate your family. Like sometimes every couple of years. He's had 20 years of it. He's had enough. Don't blame him. He's had a decent career in coaching. He's made his money. He still wants to be involved in the game in a different capacity. Maybe NRL head office could offer him a role in development or coaching badges or working with the referees department. The NRL, though, some of the blowout scores, it's been discussed a lot for a long time, even before COVID. I will go back to the Parramatta Brisbane finals game where there was a massive blowout score in favour of Parramatta in Anthony Seibold's first season in charge of the Broncos. That was probably the game of the season, to be fair. Blowout score lines have always been discussed. And if you look at my Western Suburb Magpies video, look at their defensive record. They were on the receiving end of massive blowout scores that season. We're going back to 1999. So every time there's a lopsided result or a series of lopsided results between a team at the top and a team at the bottom, people are going, there's too many, it's concerning. Well, that team at the bottom's crap. It's got nothing to do with if it's 2 teams at the bottom and it's a lopsided score, then you can go, okay, there is something wrong here. If it's every match day weekend, there's a percentage of scores which are of what you would class as lopsided. How you would work that out is, again, subjective and not necessarily my scientific. Is it concerning? I'll have to watch the two other games that I didn't watch this morning later on this evening to then and then watch the Canterbury Parramatta game tomorrow when I get in from work to really give a fair assessment. Bearing in mind, you've had players play Origin, you've had a bye week, there's players come back from injury. There have been a lot of rule changes in the last 2 years, and I will admit the rule changes for me are the biggest concern. I'm not against the rule changes they brought in. Far from it. I'm actually liking a lot of the ideas behind the rule changes. It's the implementation of them, but I think there's been too many rule changes in too short a period. That's my concern from a perspective of fandom, not necessarily the blowout scores. I like to see good attacking play, good open play, but there are some teams, and it's the same handful of teams from before COVID who are at the bottom, struggling, whereas the majority of the league are pretty competitive. There's the top couple of clubs that are obviously quite far ahead of the rest. The Panthers being one, the Storm consistently being another. The Cowboys have been a refreshing addition to the top half of the table from where they were in the last few years. So they've been a good feel-good story under Todd Payton. And I think they're going to be consistently near the top of the table for the next few years. So they've adapted well to the rules and getting younger and faster. They've adapted well with the players coming through. Took them a little while, but they've eventually figured out how to do it. Teams that have struggled were struggling before the rule changes, though. So it's just exposed even more flaws in their structures, their squad depth, their recruitment, their coaching. So that'll be the West Tigers. That'll be Canterbury. Newcastle have had a up and down, inconsistent period. The Warriors, how many coaches do they have to go through? And people can say, oh, but they've been playing away from home. That's irrelevant. That they've been inconsistent and poor before COVID, several years ago. There's definitely issues with the Warriors setup and the structures within that club that, may never get fixed, quite frankly. So when people are saying, "Oh, look at these blowouts," these teams that are getting battered week in week out were getting battered week in week out pre-COVID. The rule changes are an easy excuse and an easy cop out by fans going, "Oh, this is crap." Well, regardless of expansion or not, these teams were crap pre-COVID. It's a cop-out to blame the rule changes. I think that is an issue, though, where the NRL has got some of the implementation of the new rules and the speed of rule changes wrong. I will agree on that. So I hope the NRL doesn't bring in any more rule changes for at least the next 2 seasons. Allow these rules to bed in. Allow, the gap to close between the bottom and the top of the league a bit more competitiveness. Maybe adjust the salary cap to suit. Would I rather have it called the League Cup or whatever sponsor? Look, I grew up with the Worthington or the Carling Cup was how it was known when I was a kid. The Milk Cup before that. Obviously, the Milk Board was sponsoring. Just call it the EFL League Cup or the League Cup. Sponsored by would be better. The FA Cup sponsored by would be better. But I prefer. Look, in all my history videos that I've done of clubs, I call it the League Cup. There you go. Or the league trophy if it's the lower league clubs who've won, let's say, the Football League trophy. Or if it's if they played in the non-league and got to the Football League, the Vase. I never mention it by, sponsorship. So I've never called it the Carabao Cup or this is Johnston's trophy. I always call it by its official title, the League Cup, the League Trophy, the FA Vase, which are the 3 other competitions run by the FA other than the FA Cup. That's how I call it. Never called it anything else. I hate these for sponsorship reasons. Does my nut. It's Americanizing the sport even further, which is why fans can't buy into it. It's why fans can't feel a connection with some of these trophies. Is they change their sponsorship name every 4, 5, 6 years, and you don't get that. The Texaco Cup, for example, in the 70s, that could have had a better name for the teams involved. Again, that creates that disconnect where fans are like, "This is not a traditional naming trophy, vase, cup. It's sponsorship there." So therefore, it's not a great way. Neymar leaving PSG back to Barca EPL somewhere else. Is he actually leaving PSG, or is it just Neymar trying to negotiate for a change to his contract? So get more wages because Mbappe is getting paid stupid money. If he was to leave PSG, what would they sell him for? Because if UEFA are serious about their spending rules, Barcelona, how can they afford him? And any club that would actually spend the money, considering he only had a contract extension recently, would be in clear, flagrant breach of the current financial fair play, and it makes a mockery of an already broken system. And that would then put added pressure on UEFA to speed up the implementation and approve their proposal of new spending rules. Look, Barcelona, with their financial problems, if they were to sign him on transfer, then it's a really dodgy looking situation there. If he goes to the Premier League or another club, that's just a flagrant breach of financial fair play. So, in my opinion, he probably end up at Man City or Newcastle because they have the money. But then, if you're looking at what Man City spent on Haaland, and they're asking in their transfer budget, the director of football going, well, how much money do we want? And then when the club directors went, here's what's this money for, and they went, a player. So where does he end up? Is he actually leaving PSG? Is this just his advisors and his agents, agitating for a pay increase from PSG? Because I don't give a toss about financial fair play. I can't see any club actually affording a transfer fee, let alone his demands for wages. So there you go. Shabalala's, yes, I remember Shabalala's opening goal of the World Cup 12 years ago. One of the best goals I've seen from open play. He just ran on and did a half volley. It's a running half volley, which is actually a very hard skill to do consistently. That was a brilliant shot. But that World Cup was, the vuvuzelas were just a migraine. The quality of pitches wasn't great, and the World Cup wasn't great, quite frankly. I think the South Africans would admit, yeah, we didn't quite get that right. Still going to be a better quality than what we see in Qatar, I do fear. And I was having a discussion about the Qatar World Cup with my neighbour Nick yesterday, because he's moving out. He's got like another month and a half left on his lease, so I'm helping him with a few bits and pieces. And we were discussing, because he's actually worked in Qatar. And I said, what were the weather conditions actually like in Qatar in our winter? And he goes, it's still bloody hot. Because he's also worked in Bahrain as well. He's a transport engineer, basically. So he's been hired by governments to do transport assessments on various infrastructure projects for rail and road and airports and case studies and working out various things to do with improvements or feasibilities and things like that. And he spent time out in Bahrain and Qatar. Now, Bahrain is an island, and they get cooled by the sea breezes coming off the Gulf, whereas Qatar is fully land. It's a peninsula, but it's fully land, and therefore it's slightly different microclimate. And he's lived in both, and they're neighbouring countries. The difference is and there's a reason why the Qatar F1 and the Bahrain F1 and the MotoGP. This is interesting. Bahrain, you can race in the day. Qatar, you race at night. There's a reason for that. Bahrain has that island microclimate, whereas Qatar doesn't. That's the difference. And I was asking, what are the temperatures actually like? And you were going, they're still in the high 20s, early 30s at midnight in that time of year. And I was like, okay, fair enough. And he goes, well, what are your views on it? And I explained my YouTube and everything, because you didn't know I had one, or two actually. And we got into like a good 7-8 hour discussion, and he was like, actually, it's refreshing to actually properly talk to a neighbour. I said, look, I've lived here you've lived here for 3 years, I've lived here for 2 years. We do talk regularly and see each other regularly. However, so this is the longest we've actually sat down and spoken to each other. And we were discussing it, and I said, so in your opinion, it's not going to be great for the weather conditions. He goes, look, I've worked out there. I can tell you now, it was brutal. And he went, Bahrain is more open to with restaurants and Westerners, drinking and eating than the the Qataris are more conservative. So, and they're expecting 1.5 million people to visit the country during the World Cup, which I find ridiculous because the infrastructure is for hotels and accommodation just isn't up to the standard. It just there's journalists right now who've gone out to view how the World Cup's going on, and those experts from FIFA have gone out. If they're saying there's not enough, when they had the World Championship Athletics a couple of years before COVID, a year before COVID, journalists were out there for the various big broadcasters. It was seen as a test event, and they were like, the heat's going to kill players if they play this time of year. It damn near killed a couple of marathon runners who were hospitalised with severe heat exhaustion, and a third of the marathon field didn't finish. The stadium was half empty, and they went, "Well, here's all the infrastructure, all the hotels and hostels and accommodation. Basically, there wasn't enough accommodation for journos." So there is that. So there were concerns before the COVID pandemic. Then the COVID pandemic slows down construction of stadiums and infrastructure. We haven't had a Confederations Cup because, again, for various reasons. We've got 6 months till the World, well, 5 months till the World Cup. I'm not sold on it being a good tournament myself. Not sold on it being a good tournament. But FIFA and the Qatari government are expecting about 1.5 million people. I wouldn't. No, 94 was a more defensively minded World Cup. 2010 was a better World Cup than 94, I think. Partly maybe because England qualified. No, I felt 94, looking back at all the footage and breaking down the style of play and watching enough games. And I remember the 94 World Cup. I was a kid, but then looking back on it and looking back on the stock footage and just watching one game of a 94 World Cup, the opening game is a good reference. So I watched the opening game of the 94 World Cup, watch the opening game of the 2010 World Cup. So the hosts obviously generally play the opening game. There's a clear 2010's better. Partly because of Shabalala's rocket of a goal, I think would definitely, wake up fans out your seat. There is a clear difference. But no, I think the vibes, I think South Africa as hosts and as a host country, they've got experience in these major international tournaments of a World Cup standard, that single sport tournament, which the US, while they've had the Olympics multiple times, winter and summer, they've never had that one-off until 94, that one-off World Cup style tournament where they're the hosts and it's that one sport and they've got to sell that one sport. Now, that's the difference between South Africa. Well, yeah, take apartheid, in there as a mitigating factor. The 95 Rugby World Cup, Africa Cup of Nations, they won it as well as hosts in 94. Cricket World Cups as well, T20 one day, they hosted them. Football, they've done the whole World Cup apart from Rugby League, basically, when it comes to World Cups. They've pretty much covered all bases. And they are a passionate sports mad country, and then their school system takes a lot of pride in their cricket, their rugby union, and now their football as well, or soccer for Australians and North Americans. They take a lot of pride in that. They do take a lot of pride in their educational links to sport, and their development, their production line of development, especially in cricket and rugby union, is ridiculous. They develop too many players for their domestic game. They're exporting players to Europe and the rest of the Southern Hemisphere and North America in rugby union and cricket because they're just producing too many at too high a standard that they can't get them all into their domestic game. Big audience for golf. It depends on global or national. It depends on what metrics you're using, but I think the peak audience was in the 10 to 20 millions range for the Open or Augusta with Nick Faldo. I think as British fans winning at Augusta and more than twice and having the success and he did in the sport, I think in the 90s helped with that growth of audience. And then you've got some of the younger players who followed in his footsteps. Greg Norman's battles. Again, some Xavi Ballesteros in the 80s inspired a lot of people because of his lovable nature and his relaxed demeanour and his fun demeanour. So yeah, anywhere between the 80s and the 2000s, early 2010s, the peak audience would have been in the tens, if not 20s of millions, somewhere in that range, somewhere in that ballpark. I don't know what the peak audience would be now for the Open or Augusta. I really don't. I couldn't tell you. It's definitely lower now than what it was 20 years ago. And you could argue social media and the changing habits of younger people not maybe being interested in golf, not really having that connect. Because Tiger Woods, I think, comes along in the late 90s, and that's where Ronnie O'Sullivan is the Tiger Woods of snooker. They come along in the mid 90s at the same time, and the popularity of these two old men's sports goes through the roof because they were young, they were dynamic, they had a bit of attitude about them, and they became early social media superstars because people were sharing clips of them and articles of them on the internet, via email, and early 2000s, satellite TV is becoming more popular. The early smartphones come along in 2006, 2007, and they're still at the top level. They're winning all these majors and all these ranking tournaments, and they're big, high profile in their, in their specific field. So that's the explosion of golf and snooker to a younger audience. Now they're seen as veteran players and at the end of their careers, and they're not necessarily had the best private lives. I mean, Ronnie O'Sullivan's very outspoken in some of his views on the direction snooker as a sport's taking. Tiger Woods is more famous now for his private life and the disaster that is his private life, and what's come out about Tiger Woods being a bit of a sex addict, and some of his antics away from the golf course in his personal life. While he's not broken any law necessarily, morally, golf has that problem with players not being the most faithful to their partners. Nick Faldo being another one. Ernie Els, some of these high-profile golfers not necessarily being the best people away from the course on a moral standpoint. You love the flag-waving Coca-Cola mix song back in the day, and obviously Waka Waka, good stage for hyper. There's been some really good commercial advertising linked to World Cups where they get high-profile players. You'll see Pepsi Max and Coca-Cola go into overdrive in the next 6 months, next 4, 5, 6 months in regards to the World Cup. You'll see a lot of adverts surrounding that to do with the tournament in Qatar. You'll see car adverts as well going, we're an official partner. So Kia Hyundai will be another one to keep an eye out for. Should the Socceroos stay in Oceania or Asia? If they were to go back to Oceania, their playoffs against one of the South American teams, which in I think this case would be Colombia or Peru. How many? They have to do a playoff against the 5th place South American team to get in, and only once as a team that isn't called Australia, who's won that playoff, got in, and that was New Zealand back. I think it was either 2010 or 2014 they qualified. They didn't do very well at the tournament, and they were pretty poor. I think it was 2014 they qualified. That's the problem with having a weak qualification, and rugby union and cricket being the two dominant sports in that part of the world, and rugby league. It's the 4th choice sport at many schools, and at amateur level, at grassroots community, when you have a community team. It's the 4th choice behind both codes of rugby and cricket. And in Australia, you've got to put Aussie rules. It's the 5th choice in some urban areas for sports participation. Now, if Australia have a very good World Cup, if they do qualify and get to the last stages, that could change, massively change. But you've got to remember, just before the Football World Cup, you've got the Rugby League World Cup. And Australia are one of the 3 heavyweights alongside England and New Zealand, possibly 4, and Tonga, one of the top nations. So there's a lot dependent on the Socceroos. It's a good name, isn't it? The Socceroos, A, getting to the tournament helps, and B, doing well. Not only getting out the group, but progressing further than the second round, I think, would be a successful tournament. I think no Oceania team qualifies directly. The problem is, if you look at sport in that part of the world, in Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Island nations, such as Papua New Guinea, Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, the Solomons, Cook Islands, rugby union, rugby league, and cricket especially rugby union and rugby league in the Pacific Basin in Oceania. They're your sports. Yes, Australia and New Zealand have the A League, which is a professional level, but it's not. It's not. How do you choose? It all depends on what your school plays, and also what local domestic grassroots level clubs at community level play. That's partly how you choose, partly your background as well. If you're working class, you're more likely to be a rugby league fan, and if you're middle class, you're more likely to be a rugby union fan. Although in Australia and New Zealand, that's a bit more clouded and blurred than in Europe, where it's more obvious. Historically, at least, not so much these days, but historically, it's more regional as well. So Southwest France is rugby league, Northern England rugby league, but rugby union in France is also just the southern half of France is more rugby union. Although metropolitan areas in Paris and Lille and Normandy also play at a reasonably high level. In England and South Wales, it's rugby union over rugby league. And the northeast as well, surprisingly, has more rugby union than rugby league. But it's a do. There's a lot of it does depend on at educational and grassroots level in local community clubs. There needs to be an interest. For me, I like both. I've played both. I've played both at school, and I've watched both religiously since I was young. I very early on I knew the differences between league and union. Very early on, partly because of accessibility through the media. So on TV, free-to-air broadcasters showed the rugby league and the rugby union, and they really did promote the overseas Australia and New Zealand tours to England and vice versa. The skill set's basically the same, really. If you're a creative player, you've got to be able to kick and pass and run. So you've got your fly half and scrum half in rugby union. You've got your halfback and 5/8 in rugby league, which is the technical terms for them. So your halves partnership, your hooker is basically equivalent to your number 8. So your spine will be your winger. So your fullback, your halves, and your hooker. They're the 4 most important positions in rugby league. In rugby union, it's your 2. It's a scrum half and fly half that are your creative axis, which is very similar. And then you link in with your number 8, your loose forwards. The forward pack is the role of the forwards is slightly different. Because you've got 2 less players on the field in rugby league. You've got 2 extra players. But your key players are what they call the spine, your creative outlet. So that would be your 9, your 6, your 7, and your 1 in league. Your 15, 9, and 10 in union. So your fullback and your halves partners, and in rugby league's case, you add in the dummy half / hooker. Depends on the language you're using to describe things, because the role of the forwards has changed massively in rugby league now, especially when it comes to scrums and set plays. You'll see outside backs bind down in scrums on an attacking scrum or a defensive scrum. So the hooker role, the number 9, has changed in a sense at scrum time, but they're the ones who's going to get their hands on the ball first to then distribute and call the plays. And then the creative ones, your halves partners, your 6 and 7 will be the ones doing that last play kick, that last play pass, that last play run. They'll be the ones calling that play 5. So their involvement on the game is a little bit different to rugby union, with you've got your inside and outside centres. If you've got a kicking 12, you can also play fly half. So a Johnny Wilson, a Dan Carter, that gives you another option on a creative side. If you've got a running inside centre in rugby union, like a Tuolangi, a Jonathan Joseph, who can also play outside centre, that means your starter player is going to be a bit more direct. So that's the difference. Is certain positions, because in rugby league you have a left centre and a right centre now. It used to be similar inside outside. Now they play on either side of the field. You've got a right side centre and a left side centre. in a defensive line. In attack, the right centre may come on the left-hand side to create an overlap and vice versa. You'll see it. If you watch last year's State of Origin, New South Wales, their centres were all over the place. They weren't set in the fixed right and centre, left centre positions. So Tom Trbojevic would cross the field and link up with Latrell Mitchell, and then you would have basically 3 fullbacks, basically, because they're fullbacks at club level. 2 of them playing centre. It's weird. It is weird. So watch game 1 and game 2 of State of Origin last year, and you'll see what I mean with the right and left centre in rugby league. Not necessarily staying fixed, but that's how you do it on the lineup sheet. So on a defensive line, that's where you want them. And you've got your fullback there. And what the 2 centres did was one of them would come onto the other side and create, with the fullback coming into the line. So they're 3 fullbacks basically playing as one centre position, which gives the halfback, the 6 and the 7 and the hooker, 3 opportunities to then go, okay, we've got a block play, an overlap, and a reverse overlap, sweep back. And it's weird how, think of it like an NFL play when the quarterback is looking to throw, but just reverse where the players are, basically. So throw forward, you're passing back. Work that out. But so that's a tactical attacking play. But in defence, Tom Trbojevic, Latrell Mitchell, revert back to left and right. But in attack, they constantly moved around, which caused no end of problems for Queensland last year, where they were battered. They'd lost the series by the second game. Yes, they win the third game close, but there was injuries and there was some player rotation. But in game 1 and 2, game 1 especially was ridiculous. Mad, record-breaking, just head explode. Because they had license to roam in attack, it makes the halves partnership of 6 and 7. They can create plays that they wouldn't create at club level. It was absolutely ridiculous. So this is what I was hoping for the World Cup to be last year, because that would have been insane to see that in the World Cup, where you've basically got 3 fullbacks playing in the same team, 2 of them in the centres, interchangeably changing left and right and adding overlaps and doing fullback runs as centres. It was an insane thing to see. Do I like watch hurling? I wish I could watch more Gaelic Amateur Association sport, and that's weird of me saying as a British Army, a son of a sergeant in the British Army, saying that. But I do have Irish heritage, and I've always had an interest in the history of the Gaelic Amateur Association sport, like hurling and Gaelic football. What they're finding is a lot of young, talented hurlers are going over to university in the US and Canada in the collegiate system and playing lacrosse, and then what you're finding with Gaelic football is a lot of them are now going over to Australia to play in the AFL system. And again, dropping the amateur and going over to a foreign league and a similar sport and going, I want to get paid. Some of the top Gaelic football talent has gone over to the AFL and the related state systems to play. And there have been some hurlers who've gone over to play lacrosse in the NCAA and the and the cross league in the US and Canada, so they can just get a payday as an overseas player. And then you've got the bandy league in Scandinavia, in like Finland and Sweden and Norway, and some of them have actually gone over to the bandy league as well because it's a similar sport. And that's a problem that the Gaelic Amateur Association sports are going to face. Is while they're not professional, some of their best talent, not all, some of their best talent is going to look overseas for employment. Basically, if you want to be a professional athlete, you don't want to stick around playing amateur level sport. That's the problem. Is the powers that be want to keep those sports amateur. Unfortunately, they're in a very isolated world. Rugby union, the only other sport I can think of in my lifetime that was amateur that is now professional, has gone, look, we're losing. We've got the cross-code talent. We've got the Super League. We've got this, growth of the battle in Australia with the Super League war, where they're now offering big money contracts to players. We cannot stay amateur. We have to go professional in order to keep our best talent. Rugby union is the only other sport I can think of that, as a international sport from the top to the bottom, has now completely gone. We have to go full time. In my lifetime, where the players actually get paid more to play than they were before, where they were getting just a match fee, but they weren't signing long-term contracts. the Gaelic Amateur Association sports are getting left behind. Rugby union's gone from strength to strength in Ireland. And again, some of the top talent as at youth level has gone, I'm going to sign up with Connacht, or I'm going to sign up with Leinster, or I'm going to sign up with Munster or Ulster and go through their youth systems. Or they've decided as senior players, you know what, I'm going to go give AFL a go in the Australian AFL has offered me, 400, 500, 600, 700,000 Australian dollars, big chunk of money, maybe $1 million Aussie dollars. I'm going over there. How does Ireland have problem players defecting to other countries? The Irish have the right to complain about it if they are, or are they cry? When it comes to football, it's quite unique with the North and the South. The dual nationality you were automatically entitled to. You're automatically entitled to both passports. And ironically, if you've still got a grandparent alive and you are British, and they have an Irish or vice versa, a British passport, you're actually technically entitled to the opposite under the Good Friday Agreement. That's where the Football Association of Ireland is having a lot of problems retaining talent, because the North and England especially, and even Scotland to a certain extent, and Wales are pinching talent. Obviously, Declan Rice is to England. I think it's to all sports. Even the US is pinching Irish talent because they might have a parent or a grandparent that's emigrated over, or whatever, and they can qualify by the grandparent rule, and that has happened in the past. Football, it's more the North and South that's a big one, and England, nicking talent. Declan Rice being a high-profile player. But then you've got high-profile examples of players staying with Ireland when they could have played for England or Wales, especially. Stephen Reid, Kevin Kilban, and John Aldridge could have all played for England, but they decided to play for Republic. And they're the big names I can think of. Matty Holland is another one who played for Charlton in the 90s and 2000s. They're the high-profile players of the last 20, 30 years who had the opportunity to play for England. They decided to play for Ireland. They do not sound Irish in their accent. They all have very British accents, very English accents. And they all had the opportunity to play for Ireland or England, and they chose Ireland. Jack Grealish is another one who actually could have played for Ireland, play for England. So in more recent years, the trend is to represent England. There's also that debate between North and South of Ireland as well. McLean being a prime example of a player who's opted for, or is it MacArthur or McLean? It's one of them who's opted for the North and one who's opted for the South, when they're both from Northern Ireland. And the FIA of Ireland is basically bankrupt. When they basically terminated Mick McCarthy's contract, and there was a big outcry about this when it happened. He got a big payout. Problem is, he's entitled to that payout because his agent and the discussions he had with the FIA, FAI, sorry, FIA is the motorsport, the Football Association of Ireland, FAI, the FI, not the FIA. Oh God, I've got that one wrong, haven't I? The FAI, when they terminated Mick McCarthy's contract, he got a stupidly massive payout, several million, I believe. But he signed that contract with the Football Association of Ireland. They were like, "Yep, we're happy to sign this termination clause. We're happy to sign all this. If we terminate early, you're entitled to X amount that's left on your contract in a one-off payment." And they terminated McCarthy's contract. There was a lot of debate whether he should have been hired as manager in the first place, but he was. That was the choice they went with. And the fallout from that, it's not Mick McCarthy's fault that the Football Association of Ireland have made some bad decisions commercially and in regards to coaching contracts. It's not his fault. It's the Football Association of Ireland's fault. And yeah, there was this massive payout. Turns out the Football Association of Ireland have got money issues, and this is before COVID. COVID has exacerbated those money issues. Beating Scotland last night is a good thing, but some of their performances on the field haven't been great. Of late. And there's been a lot of press speculation over the Football Association of Ireland, the direction that they're taking financially and the decisions they've made over a long period of time, which is impacting their ability to retain youth players who have parentage from other countries. In this case, Declan Rice with England, but in the past they've managed to retain players like Matty Holland, Kevin Kilban, Stephen Reid in the decades prior. So what's happened in the last 20 years? There's been some bad management at the FAI, basically, some bad decisions made within that organisation over a long period of time. And it's not Mick McCarthy's fault. Okay, it's not the individual players' fault. That lies with the FAI and the decisions they've taken over a significant period of time in regards to, the financial well-being of the sport, the strength of their domestic league, which is now lower than what it was originally. With the UEFA coefficient, it's actually declined in quality. Issues in regards to broadcasting rights, player retention, a whole variety of issues have impacted the organisation and the direction of the national side. And they've had some good tournaments. They've had some world-class players come out of Ireland. Robbie Keane, Roy Keane. At the moment, Kelleher, the young goalkeeper at Liverpool, he could end up at another top European side, maybe outside of England in Europe. He's played very, very well when he's played for Liverpool. And he doesn't want to be a second string goalkeeper. He wants to be a starter. They've developed some really good players. The problem is, it's more than a bigger, wealthier association. Let's say that the player's got an opportunity to play for. He might be half Spanish, half Irish, for example, which is highly unlikely. But let's say that's plausible, or half French, half Irish, half English, half whatever it may be. The wealthier football associations, the wealthier federations can come along and go, look, you played your youth level with the FAI, but your match day fee and we've seen you're talented. We want you to play for us. You've got more chance of playing at a tournament in the latter stages. You've got more chance of winning a tournament in the latter stages. Come play for us. They do that. It's like Clubland as well. It's they entice the player to sign with them and commit to being an English international or a Spanish international, like Brereton Diaz playing for Chile, because he knows playing for Chile rather than England at the level he's currently playing at as a Blackburn fan, he's going to get further in a tournament, get some attention, earn a higher match fee, that kind of thing. And that's what these football associations are doing, is they're trying to go, okay, there's a super talented player who could play for 5 or 6 nations, hypothetically, with the grandparent rule. Imagine someone in the US having grandparents from 8 different countries. It'd be ridiculous, right? And it has happened. You can imagine that with 8 different football associations, including the US, going, we want to have that player play for us, like Pulisic or Giuseppe Rossi, for example, when they're young, and they're clamoring over them. They're trying to get him to say, look, I'll commit my international future to Croatia or Italy or whatever the country may be. We're going to have that situation with Australian and American players. Look at Pulisic right now. There's going to be other players coming through, 16, 17, 18 years old, who, with the grandparent rule, or the parent-grandparent rule, not residency, but that kind of dual nationality kind of rule, where they could have all their grandparents, for example, from 4 different countries. Their great-grandparents from 8 different. It's going to be ridiculous. And their grandparents might have dual nationality, might still be alive, and they might have dual nationality. In theory, you could have 8 separate countries you could represent under the grandparent rule if they had the dual nationality. It's ridiculous, right? And can you imagine 8 football associations trying to get hold of this young player? That's going to be mental. And if you're one of the poorer ones, you can't give them the match fee. You can't give them that benefit of going, we're definitely going to be always in the last stages of a World Cup. So your club career can also benefit from playing with us. That's what the Irish have a problem, is they can't financially compete. But then you've got to look at the structures of the FIA, and there's been a big discussion within Ireland about the financial situation that organisation, with some of its commercial dealings, that it's dealt with sponsors and contracts with employees, not necessarily on the football side, big discussion. So I've got a bit off topic, but at the same time, you can see where the wealthier associations can come along when there's a player who's eligible to play for multiple countries and go, play for us. Here's your match fee. It's a lot higher. Also, you have an opportunity not only to play at a big tournament, which you may do with Ireland, but get to the latter stages of a big tournament, like a quarter final, a semi final, a final. And then that also benefits them in clubland because they have those good performances. They're getting more TV time. Bigger club comes along. We'll pay X amount transfer fee. Bosh, come play for us, etc., etc. Heads get turned, distraction, and then we see all the headlines surrounding Declan Rice and the fallout from the Declan Rice situation a couple of years ago gets replicated over and over again further down the track. Basically, I can understand the frustration from Irish fans, for example, and those other small nations when it comes to losing top talent to bigger neighbours or wealthier football associations who can offer that. Come play for us. It's the same in clubland. It's the same in clubland when you have that club that can't financially compete because of financial fair play being a joke that it is. Same in Major League Baseball. I've done videos on World Major League Baseball, the salary cap situation, the lack of, and Dan, who's obviously in the chat as one of the moderators, he's a baseball fan. He plays it at university in the US, and he goes, he stated in one of the comment sections of one of the videos, small market teams, so those poorer teams, those teams with less money, they can't compete. And he goes, I feel sorry for the fan bases of a Major League Baseball franchise that has less money, can't compete every year, can't afford to keep the best players. Best players get poached. They can't build any success. It's the same in European football when a team like Atalanta, for example, suddenly bursts on the scene. They have a couple of good seasons and then better financially backed clubs circle like hawks. When a player's having a good season, they'll offer him stupid money, try and entice him away, pay a transfer fee, get him out of the club, and their club gets asset stripped because they're trying to be successful within their means and they can't afford to retain their best talent. Not because they're not a good side, it's just because the bigger clubs with a bit more financial backing, which is why I think UEFA do need to bring in these new spending rules as soon as possible, because it's healthier for the competition having multiple teams competing, because it actually forces clubs, instead of buying in talent, to develop talent more and focus on internal recruitment rather than external recruitment, and it's healthier for the league basically. And this is what financial fair play was meant to do and has failed to do over a significant period of time. So there is that. Obviously, in the cricket, England are trying to chase down try and win the second test. They had a very up and down first test. I mean, they won the first test because of Joe Root and his second innings century. And I need to do a career video on Joe Root, I think. But that's my viewpoint on Ireland's situation with, I wouldn't say players defecting, but young players being enticed away from the Irish system into the English system or another European or even North American system with the US, hypothetically, because they have more money to support them. The SEC, I'm assuming that's the conference in the university system. I don't follow the NCAA system at all. I don't really follow the collegiate systems. While I understand the importance behind that, again, that's going to be those high school students who are trying to get those sports scholarships. Again, that's going to entice those talented youngsters to their program. It's the same in collegiate sports in the NCAA. If they've got a well financially backed program. Pope has hit a century as England pile on the runs against New Zealand. So England are really giving a battle in chasing down New Zealand's 553 on the third day at Trent Bridge. So finally, England have got some batsmen who are scoring centuries, which hasn't happened for a long time. There's a big Steve Clarke and the Scottish national side are under a lot of growing pressure in the fallout of their defeat in Dublin against Ireland, 3-0 defeat. Could Steve Clarke be on the way out? I think he's the best guy for Scottish football, but as coach, I can't see any other coach sorting out that situation there. The Núñez signing from Benfica, Darwin Núñez. There are some saying it's a done deal, others saying we're getting close. The Uruguay striker, we're looking at anywhere between 64 million or 85, depending on add-ons and various things. So we'll see what happens there with the Núñez signing. There are some on social media saying it's a done deal, and there's other media sites saying they're close. They haven't fully agreed everything. That'll be the biggest transfer of the transfer window so far. There's some other ones as well. New Zealand are bouncing back after their with the women's rugby union side. The Black Ferns beat Canada after a very disappointing autumn, and the post-autumn review into what happened, which has resulted in the coach being axed and changes happening there. 5 substitutions are to be made permanent. The use of 5 substitutes will be introduced into the laws of the game. The International Football Association Board. The rule was a temporary rule, so 5 substitutions to be made permanent, most likely. Although for next season, it's up to the discretion of whatever tournament or league that is being played. It's not a permanent rule; it's a voluntary, discretionary rule. It could be made permanent for the 2023-2024 season, in time for the 2024 Euros. But there's still that imbalance with stronger squads over weaker squads, and those clubs that can do it. Although the Premier League clubs did vote in favour of introducing the 5 subs for this coming season. So we'll see what happens there. That could also impact the World Cup as well. If they vote in favour of that. Right. Man United are rumoured to be interested in signing Robert Lewandowski to stop him going to Barcelona. Lewandowski has also had interest from PSG. Chelsea are also interested in signing Lewandowski, but they're trying to offload Romelu Lukaku in order to do that. Richarlison is very closely linked to a move to Spurs. Bernardo Silva, Man City want to have 80 million for him. And Barcelona, where's Barcelona getting all this money from to sign players when they're broke? Barcelona president Laporta says the club are close to agreeing a new deal with Gavi and Nkunku is set to stay at RB Leipzig and not move out of the Bundesliga. Asensio is linked from Real Madrid to Arsenal. Pogba is set to return to Juventus. Don't know how that's going to work out. Also, Arsenal are trying to sell off their Bernd Leno to Fulham. Minamino and Williams are also linked to Fulham as well. So Fulham are looking to spend big. Bayer Leverkusen are interested in signing Granit Xhaka from Arsenal. Tielemans is also linked with a move from Leicester to Arsenal. So Arsenal looking quite busy. There's a lot of rumours going on at the moment. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the transfer market. It's been very quiet until recently. The Núñez near completed transfer is the big one at the moment. That's interesting. What else? Oh, the EFL has stepped up involvement in the sale of Derby County. The English Football League is to become closely involved in the sale of Derby County in order to secure the future in the league. They weren't interested in Bury, which is interesting. Chris Kirkner failed to meet the Friday deadline to buy the club. Conditions suspending Derby's expulsion from the league just imposed when they went into administration have been changed. That's interesting. The EFL now wants to be informed of all discussions between administrators, Quantuma, and potential bidders. In a statement, the league said it was increasingly concerned the delays presented a real risk to the integrity of next season's competition. Finally, the EFL want to try and keep a club alive. They screwed up with Bury. The fallout from that collapse, I think, really has put, and the fallout from Macclesfield as well, even though they actually got relegated out of the Football League anyway before collapsing, has put a lot more pressure on the EFL not to allow clubs to go bust. And the size of Derby County, that's going to be a massive loss of revenue for League One clubs if they were to go bust. EFL Chief Executive Trevor Birch said Derby had been given enough time to complete the sale, but further urgent proactive action was now needed to secure the club's future. How about the EFL comes in and buys the clubs itself until a suitable buyer can be found? Change your rules there, EFL. Following this latest setback for the club and its fans, it's vitally important that as the sale of the club is concluded at the earliest opportunity. Yeah, so the EFL now getting very hands-on with the potential, the future of Derby County. Yeah. The Welsh, this is interesting. World Cup 2022. Welsh staff boycott Qatar over the gay rights row. Some of the Welsh national football team staff will not travel to the World Cup because of the country's stance on LGBTQ rights. The head of Welsh football, Noel Mooney, said the team would use the event as a platform to discuss human rights in Qatar, where LGBT rights are illegal. He's also asking FIFA and UEFA to think very deeply about their conscience when choosing host nations. Qatari officials said it would be the tournament for everyone. No one's buying that. Following a 1-0 victory over Ukraine, Wales has qualified for the World Cup. Yeah, we know about that. The decision by FIFA to host the tournament in Qatar has been widely criticised, with the country's wider record in human rights coming under closer scrutiny. Human rights organisation Amnesty International has multiple concerns. We knew that anyway, including Qatar's record on gay rights and its treatment of migrant workers. Homosexuality is illegal in Qatar. Amnesty said women and LGBTQ also continue to face discrimination in law and in practice. The Football Association of Wales, the FAW, that's a good one. It's a golf term. Said the squad hoped to use the World Cup as a force for good. He added the consensus between the European UEFA nations is to use it as a platform for improvement, and that's what we intend to do. We're looking forward to playing a very active role in airing our views. He did not believe it was the right. Well, of course, it's not the right thing because that will hurt them financially. But he said some of his friends and fellow staff members won't be travelling because of the country's stance on LGBTQ rights. They're not going to go to the tournament, which is absolutely the right to do. The vast majority of people will go and understand also our position is a platform to try and improve life there and have a good dialogue on human rights and migrant workers. So, yes, that's an interesting one. The Northern Ireland manager Barraclough's under criticism as well. Talking about my view on the LIV Golf Invitational Series, Bryson DeChambeau has become the most significant player to turn his back on the PGA and join the Saudi-funded LIV Golf Series. He's one of the younger players to sign up. He's 28. He won the 2020 US Open. It will be interesting. It will be interesting to see what actually now happens when you've got a player who's a lot younger joining the competition. It does change what's going on in that. Not a lot else going on really. Obviously, Pope's hit his century. Verstappen won in Azerbaijan. Let's see what live football is on. Let's have a look. Oh, come on. That's what we want. So there are some interesting things. There's Triathlon World Championships Series. The World Triathlon Championship Series leads. That's going on at the moment. Nations League, Northern Ireland are losing to Cyprus at the moment. So Cyprus are beating Northern Ireland 1-0. Then you've got the Gaelic sports as well. Nations League, England bottom after goalless draw with Italy. That's not good. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at the fallout from England, Italy at Molineux. Mason Mount struck the crossbar. England's winless start to their Nations League campaign continued. There was an experimental formation. They failed to break down European champions. The game was played behind closed doors as a punishment for the chaos. They invited some school kids to be the fans, basically. So they were quite excited, and fair play to them. But let's have a look at the fan reaction, because there's been a lot of criticism aimed at several. Scotland and England and Northern Ireland are the ones being most. They're the three home nations facing a lot of criticism. Southgate, Barraclough, and Steve Clarke are getting hammered on social media. This is a funny one. If Raheem Sterling posted a comment on here, it would end mid-sentence because he had no idea how to finish it. Another fan's going, "You're an honest, decent bloke, Southgate, but if we are to have any chance at the World Cup, you have to do the honourable thing and go. Your brand of footballers does dishwasher and so hard to watch." Spare a thought for the parents and guardians who are accompanying the school kids for 90 minutes. Plenty of snacks. 3 games and no goals from open play says it all, really. That is actually quite damning. 3 games in a row with no goals from open play. The kids were booing. That's the school kids who were invited to watch the game, because no match-paying fans were allowed in attendance because of the Euro 2020 final fallout with playing the game behind closed doors. Oh, this is the best one. An absolute ball draw played out in a public swimming baths atmosphere with Southgate watching on as a last-minute stand-in for the PE teacher. That's got to be one of the best comments. That someone's won the internet there. What a dross. Basically, the fans are hammering Southgate. I mean, three competitive internationals without a goal is concerning. Wales drew with Belgium. Belgium aren't having a good Nations League either. But right now, Northern Ireland are losing 1-0 to Cyprus. As we're discussing this, that's got to be a concern with some of the talent they have available. Wales obviously got a draw against Belgium. Belgium are having a really poor Nations League as well. So there's Scotland are the one I think under the most. Scotland must hit reset button after Dublin lost Andy Robertson. Steve Clarke. Scotland let the manager down and must hit reset after a dismal Nations League loss to the Republic of Ireland, says Andy Robinson. They lost 3-0 in Dublin. That follows on from their defeat to Ukraine, where they lost 3-1. They did beat Armenia, but they're not up to scratch. They're saying they're not good enough. There's a lot of, again, and I will say this, Steve Clarke has a very decent record as Scotland manager. He's their first manager since 1998 to get them to a major finals. So I have a lot of time for Steve Clarke. I do rate him as a manager. He's done great things in the game. With limited budgets in club level, but it's a disaster. Yes, I've been reading that article. The EFL are very frustrated, but why couldn't they do this with Bury? Why couldn't they do this with other clubs? Macclesfield, they allowed other clubs to go bankrupt, bust. Suddenly the EFL, facing the backlash they have in the last 3 years, following on from the Bury situation, that's where I draw the similarities. Suddenly, oh no, Derby going bust, bad for the league, Bury going bust, no problem. What I find interesting is when Accrington Stanley's chairman came out and saying the fact that Bury going bust has cost us $250,000 in revenue, and this is before COVID, tells you all you need to know about the EFL going, we have a problem. Derby is a big club. They have won, the top flight before. They've been a top flight side. They've won the old Division 1. They're founders of the Football League. Never been out of the Football League in their existence. It looks really bad when one of your foundation clubs is in this situation. And it wasn't that long ago they were a Premier League side. Yes, you can say Mel Morris has damaged the club. His ownership was a disaster. Yes, I do agree with those viewers and subscribers who've said that in the comment section in the video I did. I will say this, if the EFL had properly enforced their rules from the get-go, Derby County wouldn't be in the situation. So the EFL have to take a lot of responsibility for the shambles shit show that is Derby County right now. They gave multiple extensions to Chris Kirchner. He failed to meet his obligations with those extensions. The same thing happened in the Chelsea sale with the Premier League involvement. Now, what I find most striking and most hilarious is the director's test. And I've seen this in statements. Oh, we brought the director's test in following the Abramovich purchase, should I say, of Chelsea back in 2003. We brought it in to stop. How many bad owners who have then left clubs in a worse state than what they bought them in administration, facing liquidation, facing winding up orders from the High Court over unpaid taxes, have we seen since the director's test has actually been part of the FA's, guidance to the Premier League and the Football League, saying this is what we've got to have in place? It's ridiculous. The Premier League and the Football League and the FA are not enforcing their rules. The fact they're now suddenly getting very hands-on with the Derby sale, but they didn't get hands-on with Berry. It's the same organisation. Nothing's changed in the EFL. Nothing's changed apart from suddenly they can't have one of their bigger clubs fail, but they can let a smaller club do so. They couldn't let Bolton fail or Derby, but they can let Bury. Ex-Premier League clubs, bigger fan bases, bit more money. Oh no, we can't. Oh no. I'm sorry, that's rank hypocrisy. It's one rule for one club, one rule for another. Yes, Mel Morris has destroyed the club. There's no doubt on that. But if Mike Ashley buys the club just to do what he did at Newcastle, Derby have had it. Look what's going to happen to Oldham and Scunthorpe United. They've had it. I can't see them getting back to the Football League anytime soon. Macclesfield going out of business, Bury going out of business. Bad owners have been allowed to mismanage football clubs for too long. And that's overseas and domestic. So let's not say, all English owners are smelling of roses. They're not. But and not every overseas owner is terrible. I think Ryan Reynolds at Wrexham is doing a very good thing, very good job. He's decided to actually get very passionate and actually understand the sport and understand the link with the community and wants to do very well at Wrexham. But, and I will stress this, the situation at Derby has been a shambles for 9 months. Longer, 3 years actually. It's been a shambles for a very, very long time. Birmingham City, I think, is the next club to end up like Derby County situation. There are a few steps. So basically, this is the situation. Bolton got out of trouble. Bury didn't. Macclesfield didn't. Derby is a bit further back down the process. Birmingham City's a bit further down the process. Will end up. The EFL needs to change its ownership rules. If a club goes into administration, the EFL takes over the day running of the club. They have the money. They can pay wages. They can keep the club afloat until a suitable buyer is found. That's what I think should happen in all situations, is that the EFL steps in until a suitable owner can be found for the club. Other sports and other leagues do it fantastically. When a club has got money issues, they step in, they keep the integrity of the competition, they find a suitable owner. The NHL and NRL have done it. I know that for a fact. I think Major League Baseball's done it. I think, the NFL's done it, I think. They step in, they keep the integrity of the competition going. They wait till the end of season, or they try and find a suitable buyer or a suitable replacement team, whatever, but they make sure that the integrity of the competition keeps going. The NHL and NRL have done this, where they've stepped in, they've purchased directly a team, hold on to that ownership for a couple of years, and then they sell the team on. Partly because they got revenue sharing as well, but that's pretty much it. I think, yes, I've seen some pretty salty fans on social media who are like, well, you allowed it. It doesn't matter, it's Derby County, it could be any team. Insert team name here. It could be any team. And depending on the price of oil, Newcastle and Man City in future could end up in this situation. And if UEFA are successful in bringing in their new spending rules, Man City and Newcastle will be fucked. Man United will be fucked. Nothing will change until the Premier League club goes down to the wall. Look at Chelsea. Yeah, absolutely. If Derby County was still a Premier League side, situation's different. If Portsmouth was still a Premier League side, situation's different. They allowed Portsmouth the last side in the Premier League to get it. I think we're the only side in the Premier League ever to have a points deduction to start the season. Absolutely fantastically diabolical how the situation because Chelsea's a big sick. If that was again, if Chelsea were Portsmouth again, they start the season with a points deduction. Simple. The Chelsea situation gets fixed with 24 hours remaining on the deadline. Derby doesn't get fixed. 2 deadline extensions doesn't get fixed. Deal collapses. So yeah, I think there's one rule for the big. It's a PR exercise. We can't let the big clubs fail at our level, but we can let the. It's a shambles. It's a shambles. Quite frankly, the Premier League and the EFL can step in to become owners during an administration. Go, look, we'll protect the integrity and help us to find a suitable buyer. They can easily change their rules to do that. Derby County founders of the Football League, so it's quite embarrassing when one of their foundation clubs is in this situation. It really is embarrassing that one of the oldest clubs in existence and one of their foundation members is in this situation. It should not be happening. The weakness of enforcement of the rules allowed Mel Morris to do what he did. So they're both parties. Mel Morris just took advantage of the situation, going, "Well, I'm not being punished. I'm going to do what I want." But the EFL failed as the custodian of those 3 leagues to enforce the rules that the FA set to them, saying that this is the rules that UEFA have for financial fair play. We have to impose our own version of financial fair play. Those rules on our constituent leagues, which are the Premier League, the Football League, and the non-league. You have to meet these regulations. There's some leeway with what we can do, like a soft salary cap type thing, luxury tax thing, but here's what we can do. The EFL, weak governance has led to this situation over a 3-decade period. Let's be clear on that. I do understand that Chelsea have more bidders than that were interested. However, Derby have at least. Yes, Mike Ashley is famously now very, very publicly one of them. Fresh from his sale of Newcastle, so he's got a bit of cash, which could quite easily solve Derby's issues like that, and he would still have money from his Newcastle sale, and the club could still be profitable. The situation's what it is. The Chelsea situation was solved very, very quickly. They got that one done. As soon as there were press reports, "Oh no, we're concerned it may collapse," suddenly it was solved. Suddenly they were going to. So I think the greed of the sport. Look, as I say, look, I'm not an expert. What I do know is there's been 2 timeline extensions given. Kirchner failed to meet that second extension deadline. There was no third extension given. They want a quick fire, so I can see. There's only 5 players on full-time contract. Wayne Rooney's future is now in doubt. Leroy Rossini's future is now in doubt. Your coaching staff may not be there at the start of next season. 5 players on contract. It was like Swindon Town this time last year. They almost went bust. They were saved right literally at the last minute. So clubs can be saved. They don't have to go bust. But if the rules were properly enforced from the get-go, we wouldn't be in this position, quite frankly. But they're not. So cherry picking what clubs to enforce the rules upon has led to this. Derby were not the flavour of the month when it came to the owner, so the EFL were like, "Okay, we'll pick on Derby." They could have any one of the 72 Football League clubs under the EFL's umbrella at the start of last season. In theory, could have been anyone. All of them technically are in breach of the current spending rules. All of them are currently in breach of financial fair play in some way. Others operate on far smaller budgets, like Accrington, for example, who do it very, very well, and Exeter, who do it very, very well and live within their means. But the majority don't. However, the losses exceeding profits, so losses more bigger than revenues. God, if they were to properly enforce the rules, there'll be points deductions and fines all over the place. And that's a bad look. Because they failed to properly enforce the rules for so long, and they've been cherry picking which clubs to basically punish in order to scare the others into line, which has failed because they continue to do this. Says it all, really. Basically the financial mess that is the Championship, in order to get to the Premier League, and the financial mess that is League One. Look at Oldham's situation where they've ended up gone out of the Football League. Tells you all you need to know. The financial instability, I think, of the Championship and the massive losses clubs are making, the then the business model in the Championship is unsustainable because of the greed of the Premier League and a handful of clubs in the Premier League. It's just unsustainable. And also the shocking TV deal that the EFL has negotiated over the last 30 years is also partly to blame. The TV deal is crap. The money's not evenly distributed. The wealthiest game in English football was the playoff final. The winner gets the majority of the spoils there. The loser generally ends up going bust, quite literally, and not. Look at Barnsley. They were in the playoffs last year. They finished bottom in the Championship so the instability of clubs in the Championship is ridiculous. Then they carry that instability into League One and League Two when they fall down the football pyramid, which has a knock-on impact on those leagues when these clubs hit administration and start struggling financially. I fear for Burnley this coming season. I think they're going to have a fire sale. They're going to end up in a similar situation because they've got debt with the leverage takeover that the Premier League allowed, which again, technically, if we're going technically, it's other people's money. It's not the owner's money; it's someone else's. They've taken loans from outside investment, third party investment, and it gets harder to service that debt at a lower level. So Burnley are stuffed. They could be in Derby County situation within the season. Even with the parachute payments, there's going to be a fire sale at that club. Players like me and Tarkovsky, for example, have gone, we're leaving. So that club's going to have its playing squad decimated. I fear for the quality of team they're going to put on the field when it comes to the Lancashire Derby against Blackburn, my team. The quality of performance and the quality of players available to Burnley in regards to their rivals like Preston and Blackburn, for example, who are going to wipe the floor with them. We're going to wipe the floor with them. And I take no happiness in that because it's not a fair contest. It's not as if we're both at the same level competing for promotion or battling to avoid relegation. It's going to be a mismatch, absolute mismatch, because they've had to basically sell off their top talent and for whatever price they get. Basically, we could pick up some Burnley players for peanuts, basically, quite frankly, if we wanted to. Because some Premier League clubs go, well, they got relegated, they're not Premier League standard, when actually some of these players really should be playing at a higher level. So the fire sale at Burnley is going to continue, and they're not going to make it back, even with parachute payments. I think, ironically, Nottingham Forest, much like Brentford, are the best equipped, to survive at least the first full season without getting relegated from the Premier League. Both playoff final winners because of the prize money they win by winning the playoff final. I can see Fulham. I can see Bournemouth probably being better equipped staying up than Fulham. Ironically, that's weird, though, isn't it? We'll see how Fulham do in their first season back. But Fulham are becoming a yo-yo club, like Norwich, like Watford. And there's only so long you can do that before you either have to stabilise in one league over the other. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, the situation in football, the financial side of it's a mess. Absolute mess. And we've got some very dodgy owners who should be in prison, quite frankly, for a variety of offences. Look at Birmingham City, for example. Look at Leeds. There's been some rather dodgy ownership. Sheffield Wednesday, Portsmouth, where club owners should have been in prison for a variety of financial or other criminal offences. The Oystons of Blackpool, how they were allowed to ever own that football club is quite frankly beyond me. I think there needs to be massive changes to how the Premier League and the Football League operate with club owners, with the auditing of the health of clubs financially. We know that the clubs were cooking the books for a very long time and not fully disclosing their financial situations before COVID. I wouldn't say necessarily the gap between leagues. I think the financial mismanagement in the Championship is on an industrial scale. The TV deal is completely unbalanced on an industrial scale, and it's very, very hard to. The big six basically command the monopoly of TV money, which hampers the rest of the league in being competitive in the Premier League. The TV deal for the Football League is a joke, absolute joke, which doesn't help with the massive overspend of Championship clubs, which then affects League One and League Two. When clubs get relegated, and then the integrity of the competition gets thrown up in the air with the Bury situation. When Accrington's owner came out and said, look, we have just lost £250,000 in revenue on the season, which was, I think, a third of their salary revenue or player value or something for that season, their budget. They've lost that much revenue with the home and away games being lost. The EFL cannot allow any other clubs to end up like Bury or Macclesfield. It just cannot be allowed because it does damage the integrity of the whole competition from top to bottom. The fact, however, they're basically doing their best not to allow Derby to end up like Bury, but did their very best to stop Bolton ending up like Bury, tells you it's one rule for bigger clubs than the smaller clubs. There's a lack of transparency in the whole system. There's not enough auditing done. I think they need to have annual audits of the accounts at clubs because clearly owners are fiddling the books. Bearing in mind, at the end of the 2015-2016 season, clubs were saying in the Premier League, we can allow our fans in for less than £10, but we're going to charge them £70 for a ticket. We can actually afford £10 or even free. This is what is really interesting. Half the clubs in the Premier League in the 2015-2016 season claimed they could allow us in for nothing and still make a profit because of the TV money, the merchandise sales, like programs, matchday food and drink, the sales in the club shop, the TV money. What a lie that was. What a lie that was. So clubs were basically lying about their financial state 5-6 years ago. Actually, on the record, they were lying. Club chairmen and club financial officers were lying to our faces, saying, we can let fans in for nothing or less than a tenner, and we still make a massive profit. Right? How badly were we lied to when clubs like Bournemouth and Tottenham and Liverpool, who were all Premier League clubs at the time, and two of them still are, Newcastle, all basically said we're going to use the government furlough scheme, so we don't actually have to pay the full wages of our non-playing staff. These were some of the clubs claiming they could let us in for nothing. Premier League clubs, right? So that just tells you how badly the finances are, the financial oversight is, how bad there's no auditing. No one really knows. When Chelsea apparently was worth 4.2 billion, that is a joke, quite frankly, considering that the club has 1.5 billion in debt over its entire ownership by Abramovich. They lost that much money. They never made a profit. Suddenly, only one season did they make a profit, and that's when they had a transfer embargo. Let that sink in. Oh God, there will be a point where the imbalance is there for all to see. It's unsustainable, completely unsustainable. UEFA needs, I think, if Derby County were a Premier League club and had just won a trophy, for example, and they were a European club side, and that this was to happen, the situation is different, completely different, because it will make UEFA look really stupid with their financial. They've already admitted financial fair play doesn't work anyway, and they haven't even ratified yet their proposal. Remember this proposal for new club spending rules, which some of the clubs are resisting fiercely. Bearing in mind, a handful of Premier League clubs are severely resisting the fan-led review and the 50-point proposals or 40-point proposals that the fan-led review and independent governance body of football. Notice this. Handful of clubs are resisting change because they're not allowed to break the rules anymore. Who would have thought? We want to self-govern so we can continue to, flout the rules. We want a European Super League. All they care about is themselves. But what is interesting is when the players have basically come out basically saying to their employers, no. When La Liga clubs in Real Madrid and Barcelona wanted to take games to the US, the players went, no. So it is interesting. There is a divide between the players and their employers. We've seen this in the major leagues in the US with the Major League Baseball, the NHL having lockouts and strikes in my lifetime. And prior, most recently with Major League Baseball having their lockout that lasted, it's the longest lockout and the second longest labour stoppage in league history. Basically, their players and the owners going at odds over the direction of a sport. We are seeing it now where the players are going, hang on a second, this Nations League, we don't want this. The governing body wants this. the ticketing for the Champions League. We're not happy on this. It's not for the fans. Part of the problem is the players' wages. With Newcastle getting bought by the Saudis, who's to say the Prince of Bahrain or whatever investing in a club like Brighton, Football Palace? There's American involvement with Palace. Fulham's got American owners. I think Brighton's got American owners. So they've got billionaire backing. They're not short of cash. How much they spend is different, but their owners are pretty wealthy as well. In order to stay within financial fair play, however, the Newcastle can't just throw the money around willy-nilly. But Barcelona, a club that's meant to be completely bankrupt, right, is still trying to get some stupid transfer deals done. I'm sorry, this is a club that was like, we can't afford to pay our players. We're broke. Yet suddenly Barcelona found all this cash. No, they haven't. The whole economy of football is going to collapse if it continues unabated. Suddenly Barcelona have found all this cash to splurge on contracts and transfer. No, they haven't. None of the clubs involved in the European Super League made a profit at all in the season before the European Super League. None. And that's the season before COVID as well. Only one club made a profit, that was Chelsea, because they had a transfer embargo. That tells you something about the so-called rich clubs. If they are standalone entities, they are bankrupt. They are losing money that if they were a normal business in industry, they would have collapsed. There'll be government involvement in to try and salvage what they can. There'll be calls to nationalise this and administrators and job losses would be so looking at it and looking at the top 4 leagues of English football, for example, I think out of the 92 clubs in English top 4 leagues at the moment, as of last season, I think 10 were profitable as standalone entities, not including their owners' wealth and what the owners put in. As standalone entities, 10 or 12 were within the 135% rule. That tells you what we need to know about football finance. It's built upon debt. It's an economy that is a false economy, right? It's a false economy. So every single one of the European Super League clubs that was involved last year, one made a profit, one failed to disclose, and the other 10 were all in massive hemorrhaging money. The top 10 paid players for wages until Mbappe's contract, right, were in Spain. The only reason why Chelsea made a profit the season before the European Super League was because of the transfer embargo. Liverpool failed to refused to disclose their losses or profits, and the other 10 all had various levels of debt or losses made in the prior 12 to 24 months leading up to announcing the European Super League this time last year. Let that sink in. One made a profit because they were banned from signing any new players. One failed to disclose, and the other 10 all made varying losses of a handful of millions, so about 20 million loss, to Tottenham's loss because of the stadium rebuild and the lack of title sponsor of like 500 million. Added on top of that, the debts that Real Madrid and Barcelona currently have, which tops around 2.1 to 2.3 billion euros. Yeah, billion, drop that in. And suddenly Barcelona are linked to multiple players in the transfer market, tells you that they don't care. Laporta is like, we're still going to try and spend money we don't have. And they still wonder why they're bankrupt and why other fan bases hate them. Not because they are a very successful side, which generally leads to a bit of jealousy hate, but the near destruction of the European club game as we know it because of greed. The domestic leagues were like, you're not doing this. We'll throw you out of our domestic leagues then. UEFA will throw you out of UEFA competitions then. And yet, Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Juventus are still signing up to this European Super League. The other clubs were like, actually, no, we need our fans a little bit more than we need the income from the Champions League. We need the income from the domestic game a little bit more than we realised. Oh, because we're broke, but we're not that broke. The only reason why some of the clubs signed up is because they had no cash. Some of the transfer fees that are being discussed and some of the buyout clauses by especially Barcelona and Real Madrid for some of their players are obscene. No player is worth more than the GDP of a nation, quite frankly, which is disgusting, quite frankly. And I think it's a false economy. We are talking about false economics. Absolutely complete false economics that are just not sustainable in the real world. They never have been, they never will be. What has come out in the last 24 months about football sums up the financial mismanagement of the previous 18 to 20 to 30 years. Since the early 90s, the complete and utter financial mismanagement. Because you have to ask the question with all these multi-million and billion dollar and euro and pound TV deals, where's all the bloody money gone? Where's all the money gone from these massive sponsorship and TV deals and these massive, like the Neymar transfer? Barcelona were in money issues 15 years ago. Before Messi's a superstar, Barcelona actually had money problems a long time ago. It's all just come to light in recent years. COVID's exposed the chronic mismanagement, regardless of the success on the field, off the field, absolute mismanagement to a degree that we've never seen before. Real Madrid, take the success away, that's great, yeah. Off the field, again, chronic financial mismanagement. Look at Valencia, they've been bankrupt twice, and they're on a smaller level in Spanish football. Again, chronic mismanagement. It's the economics of the sport is unsustainable, and I think what has highlighted that, and what will continue to highlight that, and probably exacerbate the financial issues the sport, because for some reason, following on from the financial crisis, following the banking collapses in 2007, 2008 to 2010, football still made money. How, I don't know. Every other industry was like, oh, we're gonna have less wage rises. We might have to cut staff. Other sports were hammered by the financial crisis of between 2007 and 2010. Absolutely hammered by the financial fallout from that. Somehow football continued to, it was like a license to print money that other sports were like, we can't. We can't sustain the sponsorship, the wages, the investment. Somehow, professional football globally, and not just in Europe, continued at the top level to be financially reckless. And what we've seen at the lower levels, and some top level clubs, is they're going broke. Barcelona and Real Madrid were in a weak financial position at the time of the financial crash. They have been reckless with their spending following, and they're still reckless now. So my view on the state of the sport right now is at the club level, at least, is very negative. I still love the Euros. I still love the World Cup. Where those tournaments are played, I can have my views on the Qatar World Cup of the host nation. I will still watch the tournament. I'm still going to watch the Women's Euros next month. I love international football. I do. Club football, don't love it anymore. And while I do videos on club histories and transfers and managerial changes and big, administration stories like Derby County, I don't enjoy club football anymore. It has been ruined by the massive failing of the governance side of the game by FIFA, UEFA, CONMEBOL, CONCACAF, whatever. And the financial structures are not sustainable. Clubs are going bust. Fans are paying the price of being either priced out or let down with the directions their clubs are taking. It's not a sustainable model. The business model is not sustainable. If I was to try and sell that business model to investors, they'll be like, "You are insane." Quite frankly, yeah, I wouldn't be able to sell the financial model to investors saying we're building this industry upon trillions of debt. It wouldn't sell. I would get no investors. So the economics is an absolute mess. It's a false economy. Quite frankly, it's an absolute false economy, and unfortunately, not enough is being done to stop that false economy in regards to football. It's been allowed for a very long time to what are we doing here? Let me just have a look at my channel. Let's have a look at analytics. I'm just having a look at the analytics on my channel, but the football's a false economy and it has been for a very, very long time. Very, very long time. So in the last month, last 28 days, the most popular videos is the Grimsby Town promotion, the Challenge Cup final, Burnley getting relegated. Some reason a video from 3 years ago is still getting views, and Derby County's administration. So there's some big ones in there from the last month. Another interesting thing: the biggest age bracket is the 25 to 34 age bracket. That's a stunning little bit of analytics. And older people are starting to watch in greater numbers as well, which is quite interesting. A lot more people in the UK are watching than before. Before it was 50%. Now it's as high as 67 on a small sample size. So there's some very interesting analytics. More women are watching as well in the last few days, a higher percentage. So yeah, that's interesting. The watch time has gone up, subscribers has gone up, views have gone up. I'm more than 2,000 views higher than normal in a 28-day period, so that's a good thing. Watch hours, nearly 200 hours more than normal. Subscribers, 375% more than the previous 28 days. So everything's trending upwards. But guess what? It's this time of year, ironically, that things generally trend up, ironically. This moment where the international tournaments are about to start or have started. So that's interesting. With Newcastle getting bought by the Saudis, who say the Prince of Bahrain or whatever, Brighton, Fulham, and Palace all have US ownership or US investment. You think more billionaires will invest in more at the top to a point where only 4 or 5 clubs will have the possibility of going down? Quite possibly, yes. And nothing will change until a Premier League club ends up in the situation of Derby. No, nothing will change until a higher profile. But then we saw it with Chelsea; they got that resolved pretty quick. And the fallout from the Bury situation 3 years ago, there has been a lot more pressure put upon the EFL in recent years in regards to how they deal with the ups and downs of football administration. And the length of time Derby County's been in administration has been a very long time. Chelsea, quick. Derby, 9 months. Chelsea, 2. The Chelsea situation was resolved within 2 months. Derby's has lingered on for 9. So let that sink in. The situation at Derby County, it's not a healthy situation. It's not going to be it's not a quick fix. And now the future of Wayne Rooney and Leroy Rossini in the coaching setup is in doubt. But they are contracted, so other clubs have to get them out of their contracts. Wayne Rooney's contract's probably got a good clause in there for negotiations. So Wayne Rooney might go the way to save this club is if I move on financially. But we're not even sure if the 5 remaining players on the books are going to get paid at the end of this month either. So there's massive concerns with Derby County and their future. But the EFL have allowed this to happen. Yes, Mel Morris is a huge part to blame of the situation, but the EFL rules, they allowed him to get to the position where he is in regards to the administration. So there we go. So I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for all your questions. Very, very interesting. I've droned on a bit, but yeah, it is what it is. Thank you very much. And I'll have some more content for you very, very soon.